Good Tuesday morning, everybody. What's going on? This is Birds 365. I'm Mike Gill. What's up? That's John McMullen. You know us, I think, anyway. You know John, certainly. I've been here a few times, and I'm back, Johnny Mac. What's going on, buddy?
What's up, buddy? Yeah, somebody just called us the stream team, a dream team, something. We'll call it the stream team. Draft week. Excited to see you. Get to people's minds after another Sixersy loss. I want to file a grievance over that.
What is more probable? What is more probable? A Sixer collapse or a Howie Roseman trade on draft night?
Boy, that's a good one. That's a good well, Sixers collapse is like death and taxes. So I'm going to edge towards that a little bit. But Howie trade is close to that.
Yeah. And of course, many people, you love this, John, when the national entity puts out the report that everybody pretty much already knows, then it becomes gospel, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because Adam Schefter reported on Monday that, he's hearing around the league that the Eagles really want to get a corner and that they would be willing to trade up. They're already making calls. It's like, do you think Howie Roseman sat around all offseason and didn't think to pick up the phone one time until draft?
Well, that's
got a great idea. Let's talk about moving up.
When you talk about Howie and checking in on people, that's why you and I have been talking for years. When it's anything involving free agent rumors, I always laugh at these stories because I say and the Eagles. And you could feel comfortable doing that because they're going to call about everybody and everything. Doesn't necessarily mean interest in any particular instance, but Howie likes to keep his finger on the pulse and understand the market and understand where everybody else is going to framework what he wants to do. So in the case of the draft, though, these things don't happen. It's not like Kevin Costner and draft day. These things don't happen on the phone. The foundation of these things happens in the days leading up to the draft when you check which teams are willing to move up, which teams are willing to move down. So foundationally, you're putting all these things into place behind the scenes, and then you try to implement them on draft night if things fall a certain way. And there's always curveballs, and that's where the difficult part comes in. You got to feel comfortable if you force to stay at 22, because it always takes two to tango too. I think a lot of people say, "Oh, he's going to trade up. Oh, he's going to trade down." Well, you need somebody else.
Let's get in the weeds quickly on this morning because Martin Frank's coming up this hour. Les Bowen next hour. Looking forward to both Martin and Les. I haven't talked to Les in a minute, so I'll be excited to talk to Les in the 9 o'clock hour. But before we get their insights here, let's get in the weeds, you and I, here a little bit. All right, they're going to trade up possibly, and we wouldn't be shocked at all. Who are they targeting? Is it a position? Because I bring up corner, which was in the report from Adam Schefter. Well, they like a corner, and if they think that they haven't drafted a corner in the first round in Howie Roseman's entire tenure.
By the way, Albert Breer said offensive line. So, it's not a position, it's a player. It's always a player. And the Eagles have clouds of prospects. So they'll have like 4 or 5 guys that they have an interest in. Devontae Smith, that probably year's the best example of this. It was really, and there were 5. If you want to add Kyle Pitts into it, but they knew they weren't getting Kyle Pitts. So it was really Jalen Waddle. It was J.C. Horn. It was Patrick Surtain. It was Devontae Smith.
So they would have been willing to move up for a corner in that draft.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. They would have drafted a corner in that draft. And it didn't fall that way. They would have drafted Derek Stingley as well. I think that was the year after. So that's why I don't get caught up in those, how he hasn't drafted a corner since Lito Shepherd. I talked all the time. You talk about it becomes gospel. A lot of us locally have been reporting for years that the Eagles would have taken Christian McCaffrey in 2017. I was there. That was the draft that was in Philadelphia. I was doing a show with you or doing stuff with you from the draft live. I was saying they're trying to trade up for Christian McCaffrey, if you remember.
Oh, I remember vividly because we were standing in the front row on the steps, and anticipating that happening. And that was the night, of course, Patrick Mahomes. They traded up to get Mahomes, and there was all sorts of crazy stuff happening. Mitchell Trubisky at number 2, the Bears traded up there. So it was a crazy night that you thought that the Eagles were going to do something off the board because everybody else was going crazy off the board.
Yeah, and I wasn't the only one to, we all got it from the same space. So there was a group of reporters that have been reporting on that for years. And then Albert Breer says it out of the blue in like 2022, and everybody takes it as gospel. And the Eagles haven't taken a running back for years, but they would have taken a running back. And even this year on the free agent market, when you talk about Saquon Barkley, they called him special. Howie called him special. That's why they were willing to go off their usual mode of doing business at that particular position. So there's always the outlier. Typically, they're not going to take a running back. Typically, they're not going to take an all-ball linebacker. But corner, they've been trying to get a big-time corner for a number of years now. It just hasn't shaken out that way. And they've gone a different route. They went the veteran route. They traded for Slay, and they signed Bradbury, and it worked out for certainly a short time with Bradbury. Slay has played very well overall, so they've had to go a different route.
Some aren't ready to write Bradbury off entirely yet, though. You're in that camp.
I'm in that camp, but they seem to be. If they draft a corner in the first round, James is going to get cut. I just find it interesting that post June 1st, obviously. I find it interesting that matching him up with Vic Fangio's defensive scheme. I think it would work. I think he'd have a bounce back season. I think Vic is smart enough to use him correctly.
Well, why Vic and not Sean and John, who run variations of Vic's? So why were they, or how were they using Bradbury? Because Bradbury had a great year in Gannon's defense. Okay, yeah. Desai comes in. Well, he runs Gannon's defense, which is a derivation of Vic Fangio's defense. So why did Bradbury seem so out of place then?
Well, I'm not the type to blame it on coaches, so I'm not going to blame it all on Sean Desai. But I do think he made some mistakes.
He's not here anymore.
Yeah, I do think he made some mistakes in moving Bradbury around, putting him in the slot, even when Slay got banged up and he moved him from right corner to left corner. Yeah, you just stick him at right corner, let him play. And I think that's what Gannon did because, part of it is just health. Guys were healthier. So Sean had to try some different things because guys weren't healthy. But and I think Vic is smart enough to just stick him where he's comfortable with and let him play zone, the vast majority of the time. And people get caught up in that too. That's not 100% of the time, but you're talking 80% of the time, and be very judicious when he's in man coverage. And I think he's never been a speed guy coming into the league when he was young. So I think those people who assume, he can't, he's got no recovery speed, never had it, but he's been a big time corner if you use him correctly. And I go back to Jason Kelce just retiring and saying, in all the years Jason Kelce played, he said he played with 2 players, Mike, that would have been successful regardless of scheme, philosophy, coaching. In other words, you could put them in anything and they'd be successful. Everybody else, and that was Fletcher Cox and Jason Peters, everybody else needs help. Everybody else needs a system. And then I was talking to a former general manager about the quarterbacks. And I said, well, who's your second quarterback? I was talking about Washington because mine's Jaden Daniels. I'm a Jaden Daniels guy. And he said, tell me who's going to Minnesota. And he said, that's going to be the second best quarterback. It doesn't matter. Drake May, Jaden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, even Michael Penix, because they're going to have Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and T.J. Hawkinson and Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. They're going to have the best setup.
We know from history, just because you get drafted to a place and you were lousy there. It doesn't mean you would have been lousy if you got put in the right situation. Yeah. This happens all the time. I'm interested to see what happens with Zach Wilson in Denver. This is going to be very intriguing. So we've already seen the first kind of domino of the quarterback situation go, where Denver maybe has said, you know what? We're not going to wait to see what quarterback falls to us. They're at number 12. I know this because I saw a mock draft yesterday that had the Eagles moving from 22 to 12, John, 10 spots.
That's a big leap. I think that was my buddy Eric Edholm, I think, did that.
No, well, maybe, but this one was Jordan Reed over at ESPN.
Oh.
And he had a 7-round mock. And for the viewers who don't know me all that well, I love a mock draft. I don't mock the mock drafters. I love having fun with the mocks.
I'm on the other word.
Right.
I'm a mocker of the mock drafters.
John doesn't like it. I like them just for the fun and the conversation of saying, like, you know, it makes you stimulate the mind a little bit. And the reason I think this one's interesting is because of what we're discussing right here. They're at 22. The conversation, it lines up with, Schefter is saying they're looking to call up for a corner if there's a corner they like. Well, of course, this mock draft has them moving up 10 spots to take Terrion Arnold. So my question would be, would Terrion Arnold be worth moving 10 spots up? Now it's, you know, hey, flip-flopping first, pick 50, and then I think 161, is it? Or one something?
Yeah, you got to, I mean, if you use which too many teams do, you use the antiquated Jimmy Johnson trade chart, 50 would get you up to
I'm assuming it's
probably 14, probably 14. So you got to give a little bit extra. That's what these guys do their mock draft trades on. They just look at that chart, and they say, all right, this will get. But does the team? So does Denver want to move out?
A flip flop of the reasoning, he has them moving back to 22 and taking Bo Nix. Now the difference is later on in the afternoon they traded for Zach Wilson. So is Denver out of the quarterback game?
I don't think so. Not with Zach Wilson.
That's the thing. It's going to be interesting though to see Zach Wilson in with Denver now, and of course Sean Payton. Like, does he feel like, hey, I could do? Because we just talked about it, John. You're a quarterback. You're drafted. Are you in the right system? Zach Wilson goes to the Jets. It's not a great system, not an offensive-minded staff. Sean Payton, much better system for Zach Wilson. Is he going to get more out of him? That's going to be interesting. But it also makes 12 an interesting spot in the draft for Howie to say, hey, you got your quarterback. You're not sitting there waiting for – now, who knows? They're talking about 6 quarterbacks possibly going in the first round. These moronic franchises taking quarterbacks in the first round just to say we have one, so that
the more that go in that top 22, the better for the Eagles. 4 are going, and Penix is probably going to be 5, and then Bo Nix is probably.
I saw the Penix stuff yesterday that says that Atlanta could be interested at 8 on him.
Yeah. I mean, he's an interesting prospect because you have some injury issues, maybe not as well versed off schedule as some of the other guys. McCarthy's interesting as well for different reasons, but the 3, no doubt about it, that would be top 10 picks in any year are probably Caleb Williams, not probably, definitely Jaden Daniels and Drake May.
Not a big Caleb Williams fan.
No, it's not that. I for those who think he's the best prospect since Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck or however far you want to go back, I don't think he's that level of prospect. Too many issues with, and part of it is in the offense he played. There's too much projection, but that's, one of the things he's obviously got all the physical skills to do it, but there's a lot of projection because he played in a very simple offense and he's going to be asked to do all these different things in the NFL. And you don't know how a guy is going to produce. And we just talked about scheme and philosophy and fit and where you land. The Chicago Bears history is the Chicago Bears history when it comes to quarterbacks. That's not exactly been the quarterback factory. So he's going to that situation. So I'm like, are they really the ones to get Caleb Williams up to his ceiling as a prospect? I question that
So
mightily.
let me go back to the genesis of the conversation, which was Terry and Arnold at pick in the top 15. If you're on draft night and Howie Roseman moves up multiple spots and that's the pick, are you looking back and saying, great move, smart decision, love it?
Yeah, I'm kind of torn. I did ask a bunch of, and I mentioned this yesterday on the show when he weren't here. I think Howie's going to trade up, and I think the targets are Terry and Arnold, J.C. Latham, maybe Fontenot, the kid from Washington, and maybe Latu. But Latu's, I put, that's got to be a medical check. And, if Arstenoda says no, there's nothing you can do with Latu. But I go back to that pre-draft press conference with Howie, and I say, he got upset about those questions about Hassan Reddick, and he said it's not a vacuum, and he was trying to almost foreshadow to me that something else is coming. So maybe I put too much into that, but those are the four
Quinyon
players.
Mitchell. What about Mitchell? Because
I don't. Well, that's what I was getting to with Arnold. I asked a bunch of people specifically who's a better fit for Big's defense, Arnold or Mitchell, and every single one of them said Arnold. Every single one of them.
there is a connection between Mitchell and Sirianni. The head coach at Toledo and Sirianni are buddies, aren't they?
Well, I had this question yesterday on a different show about Vic Fangio's impact on players and drafting, and I'll expand that to all coaches on this team. Look, they're in the process, and Howie's smart enough to not draft people the coaches don't want. But Nick Sirianni's not going to tilt the thing to, these are Howie's draft picks. He made that very clear a couple years ago. And I think it all stems from the Jalen Reagor pick in that, the Eagles, history is written by the winners, right? The Eagles, a spin on that was the coaching staff wanted Reagor, the scouting staff wanted Jefferson. So whether you believe that or not, that was the point. That was the demarcation line where Howie said, you know what? My names are on these guys anyway. I'm getting crap for these guys anyway. If they don't, I might as well pick them. Yeah. So he listens to everybody, but he makes the decision.
All right. Are the Eagles primed to make a trade up in the draft? They do it almost every single year. If they do, Martin Frank is going to give you the exact 6 players that they might be interested in. I promise you it will be one of these 6, but you need to stick around because Martin's going to tell us next on Birds 365.